The Hyundai Elantra N is the new guy. It's a young, vibrant, snarling little hot hatch born into a car market that, at least in America, doesn't love snarling little hot hatches the way we used to. And yet the Elantra N is here, shaking up a market that's been steady for a long time. The Elantra N doesn't have the long-running nameplate or history behind it that other hot hatches do, but it has something that's potentially even better: a youthful, hopeful spirit.
This is the 2025 Hyundai Elantra N, Hyundai's rowdy, really fun little sport compact. And I'm Alanis King. A lot of people wonder if this car can compete with the more established hot hatches on the market. And today, we're gonna find that out. So let's go for a drive and stick around for the end of this video to get this Elantra's full report card. Before we start this video, I also want to note that this Hyundai Elantra N is the 8-speed dual-clutch automatic, but I have extensive experience in the manual of this car, literally hours. So we're going to talk about how the automatic drives, how the manual drives, and how this car compares to the Honda Civic Type R.
The Hyundai Elantra N is young. Hyundai launched its N performance brand in 2012, and the N name stands for two things: the Namyang district in South Korea, where the brand was created, and the Nürburgring racetrack in Germany, where automakers test their performance cars year in and year out. The N logo is also meant to look like a track chicane. Cute. N is Hyundai's performance nameplate, like Type R Hondas or M BMWs. The car that made my colleagues all start paying attention to the N division was the Hyundai Veloster N, which debuted for 2019. It was a cute little hatch with one rear door and a manual transmission, and we all loved it. Right out of the gate, it won Road and Track's Performance Car of the Year, despite being the cheapest and second slowest of the batch. The Veloster N brought new life to a familiar hot hatch segment. Then, the Elantra N did it again.
The Hyundai Elantra N debuted for the 2022 model year as a competitor to far older and more mature hot hatches like the Honda Civic Type R. That means the Elantra N is in its first generation, while the Civic Type R is in its sixth. But that also means that the Elantra N has a benefit over those older hot hatches, and that is this car starts at $34,000 American dollars, while all those other cars have ballooned a bit. The Civic Type R starts at $46,000, and you might be saying, Alanis, this is a sedan. This is not a hot hatch. And I get it, it is a sedan, but we collectively call this market the hot hatch market, so it's a little bit less confusing to just say hot hatch.
The hot hatch market is tough to join. The N's competitors have decades of history and brand loyalty behind them. But the cool part about Hyundai is that the company will always try to flip reputations and entire car markets in its favor. We not only saw that when Hyundai launched its luxury Genesis lineup 10 years ago against far older and more famous brands, but also when the company entered the American market in 1986. Back then, Hyundai got an early reputation for bad reliability, but instead of bailing when US sales really fell off into the 90s, the company started offering a 5-year, 60,000-mile bumper-to-bumper warranty on its new cars, way longer than the standard 3-year, 36,000-mile bumper-to-bumper warranty. These days, Hyundai, and increasingly Genesis, is a huge player in the American market. Back in the day, most people would have never seen that coming. If there's anything Hyundai can do, it's change your mind and grab your brand loyalty. The Elantra N is just another example of that.
To me, the Hyundai Elantra N is the definition of a fun car because it came onto the market in a time when people don't buy cars like these in America. Americans buy big SUVs with automatic transmissions, not small cars with sticks. And this car is not going to sell a lot, but for Hyundai, it does serve a purpose. And that purpose is showing people that Hyundai can make fun cars. But what makes the Hyundai Elantra N fun? A lot of it is right here. This is a turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, and it actually comes from the old Veloster N. It makes 276 horsepower and 289 pound-feet of torque, and that power goes to the front wheels through either a 6-speed manual transmission or an 8-speed dual-clutch automatic. I have heard amazing things about the dual clutch, and I have driven the manual and really enjoy it. But we will talk about that later. Right now, I just want to mention that I think it's funny that when you open your hood in some cars, you have a little automaker recommends certain type of motor oil. It's just a little ad. Speaking of, I get so many compliments on this Tim Richmond shirt from our partner, Homefield Apparel. Homefield just dropped a ton of new NASCAR merch, a new Hendrick Motorsports collection, and a 3-car collection honoring one of the most famous drivers in NASCAR. You should go check it out. It all looks amazing. There's a matching Folgers jacket that goes with this shirt, and I just got a bigger discount code. So if you want 20% off your first order, you can use Atlantis20 at checkout. Before we drive this car, we have a much more important task, which is how many Atlantises can fit in this Hyundai Elantra N's trunk. And I don't know that I've ever made it super clear, but to get in the trunk of a sedan is actually quite difficult due to the narrow opening. So I just hope y'all appreciate this. We're also gonna see if I'm able to lock these keys in here or not. Yes, I can lock the keys in here. And I would say this is a solid 2 Atlantises. It's time to drive the Hyundai Elantra N. And I have heard amazing things about the dual clutch automatic in this car, and I cannot wait to drive it and talk to you about it. But I think first we need to talk about the car that is not here, which is the manual Elantra N. So in this section, we're gonna go manual Elantra N, automatic Elantra N on track, and then we're gonna compare the Elantra N and the Civic Type R. So we're gonna start manual Elantra N. I am not in love with the manual shifter on the Elantra N. It has this light thunk into gear, which is fine, but not super satisfying. Also, the shift knob, it kind of feels like a plastic golf ball in your hands. It feels a little cheaper than I would like. If it were a different material, I think it would feel really, really nice in your hands, but that plasticky material is a little eh. Another thing about the Elantra N's manual is that to get it in first gear, it requires an odd amount of gas. The clutch has an odd catch point, and if you don't give it enough gas, then it just dies. The thing about that is that you get used to it very quickly. It's not a big deal, but you do sit there wondering, this is an Elantra. Elantras are known for amazing fuel economy. The Elantra N doesn't get amazing fuel economy, and also when you're giving it extra gas to go really, really slowly in a parking lot and stuff, it does feel very wasteful, and that feels out of place in a Hyundai Elantra. Right now, we are only talking about the actual manual shifting in the Elantra N. And one thing I will say that I love about the manual Elantra N is that it has all of Hyundai's really good lane keeping programs on it. So when I drove it many hours to go to a wedding when I had it a few months ago, I just put it on lane keep and I'm on the highway, and you forget that you're in a manual, and it's just the best of both worlds because you get to have that relaxing highway driving without having to compromise and get an automatic, you know? To have lane keep assist in a manual car is so freaking cool, and I love that in the Elantra N. Now, as you can tell, I'm in the automatic right now, and I'm having an absolute blast because the way this thing corners is so fun. The way it feels just doing anything is awesome. And we are going to do anything. We are going to go to the racetrack at Sonoma Raceway where I had the automatic DCT Elantra N a few months ago. We're going to do a lap or two, and I'm going to tell you about it on there and also how it handles.
Welcome to Sonoma Raceway in the dual-clutch automatic Hyundai Elantra N. You'll see going into the first turn that I lift a little to settle the car and account for the understeery nature before we head up the hill into the second turn. But this car is really planted for front-wheel drive, and the transmission shifts so well. When people tell you the Elantra N's dual-clutch auto is great, they are not exaggerating. It shifts really fast and knows exactly which gear to be in on track. The only thing I'll say is that every time I floored it from a standstill in the auto, I felt and heard a clunk under me that reverberated throughout the chassis. It was like a massive wheel hop. In mode transforms the car to feel more responsive in every input, including steering, and the steering weights up in corners to help communicate what you're experiencing on roads and tracks. On cold tires, you can slide a little in the carousel, but you can really feel what the car is doing, and all of the weight shifts in your seat. The seats also hold you in really well, whether you're taking big sweeping corners or tight hard ones. As you can see in this video, you can also run straight over track curbs easily with no disruption to the car. This is an apex-friendly Elantra. My favorite part of Sonoma Raceway actually isn't on a lot of competition layouts. A lot of the series that run here, including NASCAR, take this long, swooping backstretch that is really high speed into the final hairpin. We're on that path now, but where this layout differs is that you actually take an alternate backstretch into a harsh braking zone chicane. So you go straight, stab the brakes, hard right, hard left, and back on path to the last hairpin. The biggest takeaway with an Elantra N is that most people think an Elantra is an economy car, but its track presence shows it's serious and a lot of fun, even with an auto. You can see in this video that the lap times are kind of all over the place, and that's because we're doing lead follow and we're sharing the track with other people. So not only do we have to slow down to get permission to pass people and switch in our lead follow group, which is what we're doing right now, but we're also at the mercy of our instructor's braking. And we could have braked a little harder. But the point of this video isn't about lap times, it's about learning how the car drives, and I think we did that pretty well.
Welcome back to Texas on the good roads. I am still ripping and having a blast, and this car is so cool. It is probably the least understeering front wheel drive car ever. It just goes into a corner and you feel like it could get a little out of sorts if you don't handle the corner well, and that's really fun and really freeing. So now we're going to talk about the Elantra N versus the Honda Civic Type R, perhaps its biggest competition. Let's go over the basics of Hyundai Elantra N versus Honda Civic Type R. The Honda Civic Type R has 315 horsepower and starts at 46,000 American dollars. The Elantra N has 276 horsepower and it starts at 34,000 American dollars. Both are front-wheel drive only and both have a 6-speed manual transmission. The Elantra N also adds a dual-clutch automatic transmission option, which is so good, and also opens it up to a wider audience. And I do see an argument for having a manual-only enthusiast car. It's really cool to know when you see a Civic Type R in a parking lot, that's a stick or nothing. But I'm all about accessibility, and an automatic Elantra N lets more people drive it. Subjective notes. The Hyundai Elantra N has more steering play in normal drive mode than the Honda Civic Type R. The Honda Civic Type R is just a stiffer feeling in terms of steering communication, and that is without N mode or plus R mode, which are the major sport modes. And I think this is up to your interpretation, whatever you like in a car, because you may like that there is some play in the Elantra N and it's a little sillier. You may also like the more stiff, more precise Honda Civic Type R. Inside, the Hyundai Elantra N is more tame than the Honda Civic Type R. This is a black interior. It has these really cool light up in logos on the seats, whereas the Type R has this embossed Type R logo. But this is a very chill interior. You could get in this and, aside from the bolstering on the seats, not realize that it is a performance car, whereas the Type R has always had a very long-standing reputation of a red interior. That car debuted with a white paint scheme and a red interior, and you're almost always going to get that red interior with the Type R. That's Boy Racer. It's a little younger. If you want something that's a little more anonymous on the inside, the Elantra N is that. The Elantra N has seat heaters. The Honda Civic Type R does not. And if you live in a cold climate or you like seat heaters, that's awesome. We also talked a little bit about how the Elantra N is a little more playful than the Type R. You go into a corner and you feel like it could step out on you a little bit, and more than the Type R does. The Type R is super precise, and I love that. I think it's amazing. It's actually my preference over a more playful car, but this is silly and it is fun. And if you like that, Elantra N. The Elantra N overall just feels more old school in the way that it drives. It goes into a corner and you have to settle it, whereas the Type R goes into a corner settled. And both are just such good feelings, and it's really up to what do you want every day, and also what do you want on the good roads or potentially on the racetrack if you take your cars to the track. It's up to you. Now we're going to talk about where the Honda Civic Type R wins. And I think in most categories of daily drivability, the Civic Type R takes it. You catch first gear throughout the length of the clutch pedal in the Honda Civic Type R. In the manual Elantra N, the clutch has an odd catch point and it requires a little bit more gas. I also just think the feeling of the shifter, you have that buttery smooth shifter in the Honda Civic Type R, whereas in the Elantra N, you get a light thunk, but the shifter just feels a little loose when you shift it up into gear. And it's not the most satisfying thing in the world, but it is really fun. If you drive a lot of items places, like say you're going to the racetrack and you need to stack a bunch of tires in the back of the car, you're probably going to go Honda Civic Type R because the Type R has a hatch, whereas the Elantra N has a trunk. And the trunk is really big, but back there you will run into some bracing that really limits your space that you don't have in the Type R. So if you carry stuff a lot, probably gonna go Type R. The driver instrument cluster gauges in the Type R are better in my opinion in both normal modes and in N or plus R modes. The gauges on the Elantra N are all digital, and to me they actually kind of look like the gauges on a hybrid car, especially when you're not in N mode. They give you information that you need and stuff like that, but the color scheme, it's very blue. And it just feels hybrid-y to me. Whereas on the Type R, you have your speed really big, you have your revs really big, and you also have the shift lights that you would get in a race car or on your sim rig. And it tells you when to shift by getting progressively more red as your revs get higher. And it's just a more engaging instrument cluster experience, in my opinion. I find myself not looking at the Elantra N's instrument cluster nearly as much because it's just not as fun. The Type R also has more heritage. It makes you feel more emotional, and it has more curb appeal. You have that bright red interior that you're going to get in almost every single Type R, and it just makes you feel nostalgic. It makes you remember the old Type Rs. It's also just a prettier car on the curb. I do think the Elantra N has the opportunity to age really, really well, but this is not a style that people are super familiar with or comfortable with yet, whereas the Type R, people know it, they're comfortable with it, and they love it. And I think if you want to go for more comfort and also more boy racer and more heritage, you're gonna go for the Type R. Now let's talk about where the Hyundai Elantra N wins. As much as I don't like the shift knob as much in the Elantra N as I do in the Honda Civic Type R, I will admit that it's more practical because in the Honda Civic Type R, you're working with an entirely metal shift knob. And people say in the comments all the time, and I know I'll get some, that when it is really cold or really hot outside, that shifter is either really cold or really hot in the Type R. Because the Elantra N has that plastic shift knob on top, you're not going to be nearly as susceptible to changes in temperature. Therefore, it's probably going to be a little more comfortable for your hand, and you won't need like a little shifter sock. I also, just out of preference, really like the light up in logos on the Elantra N's seats. I like that better than the embossed logos in the Civic Type R. And I find the seats in the Elantra N much more comfortable. They're much more built for a variety of body styles. When I get in the Civic Type R seats, my hips get really, really squeezed because they are built for a very thin, square body, right? Square hips. I don't have square hips. So when I get in this car, it's just more comfortable, especially for longer distances. And the seats still hold you in. You don't really lose that ability to hold you in with the more comfort, and I like them better. Another win for the Elantra N is that you have a physical handbrake. If you're a rally person, you like doing handbrake turns, you have this physical handbrake to just yank in the Elantra N. The Type R has an electronic parking brake, which is fine, but it's a lot less fun, and I think goes against the nature of a hot hatch. I don't understand why it's an electronic parking brake, aside from maybe some like usability benefits. Still, just put a real parking brake in there. The entire Honda Civic lineup very surprisingly, is actually quite loud on the highway and on rough roads. There's quite a bit of road noise. And that's not just in the Type R, that's in all the Civics, really. And the Elantra N, I find, is much quieter on highways and on rough roads. So if you value that, the Elantra N. The biggest win for the Hyundai Elantra N versus the Honda Civic Type R is in value versus performance. This car will give you almost as good, if not as good, of a driving experience. For some people, a better driving experience than the Honda Civic Type R for an MSRP of $12,000 less base. That is incredible. This car is so amazing to drive, and in value and performance, the Elantra N wins because it's just so much cheaper. Overall, at the same price, I personally would go Honda Civic Type R. I really love the Type R, the curb appeal, how it drives and everything like that. But at their base MSRPs, at the Elantra N being $34,000 and the Type R being $46,000, I'd have to go Elantra N because I'm very budget conscious. Now that we've driven the 2025 Hyundai Elantra N, it's time to give it a grade. Welcome to Alanis's report card. The exterior on this car gets a B+. Hyundai is super daring with styling, and I like the way the Elantra N looks. But I don't know how it will age, and also compared to other hot hatches on the market, they have more safe styling, so you're taking a little bit of a risk when you get this car. Also, points off for the super wobbly splitter right here. What is going on? Interior on this car gets an A-. I love the styling. I love the light up in logos on the back of the seats, and I love how the seats hold you in without being uncomfortable. But I'm taking off a couple of points for some of the interior materials, like that really wobbly passenger bar. The performance on this car also gets an A-. And the reason we're docking points is because on the manual, you require a lot of gas in first gear, and you feel like you are sitting there wasting gas, and you kind of are because the fuel economy is not great. And on this car in the automatic, when you floor it on the racetrack or really anywhere else, if you put the pedal to the floor, you will have a wheel hop of those wheels trying to get traction, and it reverberates through the entire car. The value on this car gets an A. It knocks other hot hatches out of the water. Would I take this car on a road trip? I have, and I would again. I love the lane keep. It's super comfortable, and it is a great car. And overall, it gets an A-. There are a couple of things that I would fix, but overall, it's not going to take away from your experience.
The Hyundai Elantra N isn't a perfect hot hatch, but it is a great young hot hatch. Hyundai hasn't had 30 years to perfect every little thing like Honda has with the Civic Type R. And that makes it feel more like a hot hatch with an attitude than one that's been crafted into a precision tool.
The Hyundai Elantra N is sassy. It's enjoyable. If it stays on the market half as long as other hot hatches, we are in for so many years of fun. And I can't wait.